Welcome to the Polish and Flourish series, which is devoted to Poles and Americans with Polish roots who flourish in the United States in every sense of the word. Today, as the Polish Culture Institute New York, we would like to honor the International Day of Women and Girls in Science. And because of that, my guest today is a computational biologist, PhD Teresa Przytycka, who is a senior investigator in the National Center for Biotechnology Information, which is part of the American National Institute of Health. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for the invitation. I am thrilled to be here.
I'm very happy you agreed to the interview. The first question is, what is a computational biology, and how would you describe it? Like, what is it used for to a layman like me, basically?
Okay, so computational biology is a very broad and dynamically changing, dynamically developing discipline. In a very broad sense, it is generally involves analysis and modeling of biological phenomena using computational methods. It includes developing mathematical model and computational algorithms. And indeed, some examples will be very helpful to explain how it's useful. So right now, I think COVID is on everybody's mind. So let me use this virus as an example, how computational biology can help in understanding, say, the evolution of this virus. So we, of course, been aware that we have these variants appearing over time. We started with Alpha, Delta, now we have Omicron. So how are those viruses related to each other? They're related by their evolutionary ancestry and by the evolutionary relation between them, and that are typically represented as evolutionary tree. So one of the very first, I think, problems that gave a boost to computational biology was this problem of how do we infer evolutionary trees. We understand quite a bit about evolution, especially evolution of biological sequences, such as DNA sequence or RNA sequence, or generally also protein sequences. Many as we know, much of the life is encoded by genomic sequences. So, and those genomic sequences are now relatively easy to obtain. They're relatively easy to measure. We can now read this genetic code of DNA. We can read the code of RNA. We can read the code of proteins. So because we can obtain at mass those sequences, you hear about this all around the world, various institutes, various sequence the samples of patients that they find this area. We have a lot of those sequences. And now we use computational methods to infer the relation between them and to infer the evolutionary tree. We understand that the sequences that are very similar to each other will be close in this tree. The sequences that are far apart are farther away. And we can formulate, we also understand some of the rules of at least we think we understand, of the evolutionary changes. So we can formulate the problem of identifying the most likely tree that follow those rules in a mathematical way, and then develop algorithms that will find this most likely tree. So this, of course, problem of identifying trees, evolutionary trees, and comparing them was much older. It's as I say, kind of from the computational perspective, emerged together with the emerging of sequencing technology, when all of a sudden biologists had to deal with all this huge amount of sequences and try to understand how they can be used optimally. So this is just one example. Of course, just knowing how the sequence, how the say viral or other biological sequences are related to each other is very useful. We can understand if we know which position, say, of the virus sequence is always constant, then that gives us information, because we know that if that position never ever changes, this place in the sequence never ever changes, maybe if it's changed, the virus will lose some of its important properties. So this gives us a suggestion that there is in this region of the viral sequence that contains some information that if we maybe destroy it or attack it with a drug, maybe changes properties of the virus, and virus will not be viral. So this is just one example. Of course, there is much more. Just as an example, the recent Nobel Prize of Doudna and Carpenter on CRISPR editing, gene editing, that also started with computational biology discovery, namely discovery of particular repeat sequences that was found in many bacteria. Then attempts to understand what that sequence is doing there led to this very, very important discovery that was then awarded the Nobel Prize. As yet, perhaps another example, I have to say that one important property of computational biology is that, of course, you can think about it in a way like data science for biologists, that it really depends on what type of information, what type of data is available for computational science to model or to use. So that's why this computational biology is so much a field that is changing so much. Right now, in the last, say, decades, we had such an explosion of new technologies, especially in the biomedical sciences. Not only we can read the letters of genetic code, we can now also look at each single cell individually and understand which genes are expressed in that particular cell at a given time. So this is enormous amount of information, and organizing it together is really a difficult endeavor. So for example, one thing that recently, and it's part of also my research, so I would like to mention this. So we can now, using this various type of data and computation method, build what we call molecular networks. That is, we can take the genes and understand which genes interact with each other, or which products of which genes interact with each other in the cell. So this allows us to build this huge networks of connections. They're not perfect, but they provide very important information. They tell us which genes talk to each other, how they are organized. We find that they are organized with groups that we call modules. And those models, certainly of this group of genes, work together to perform some function. Now, this allows us to also assign function for the genes for which we didn't have an idea what was doing. We say, oh, it's coming with this group, with this other genes that we actually know is probably related to this function and probably important to perform the same function that the other genes in this group did perform. And this also helped to look at complex diseases, such as cancer, from a different perspective. So, we all know Moonshot would like to understand and cure the cancer. One of the difficulties in curing cancer is that this is such a heterogeneous disease. You can have different mutations, and yet those different mutations may cause the same disease that look the same, that is not distinguishable from outside. So the effect of those different mutations is the same. Why? Now we're starting to understand. The mutation might be different, but they are hitting the same group, the same model. They are likely to disturb the function of the organism in a very similar way. So we can learn a lot from understanding of the relationship between those molecules. We can understand, or at least try to understand. This is all still a lot of developments needed. How perturbation, say, how if you perturb, say, one of node of this network, say with the drug, so the perturbation might spread. So of course, all of those computational analysis, computational method, computational prediction give us ideas what might happen, and then gives us helps to direct the experiments towards things where, to confirm it. Is that really what's going to happen? It gives us a direction where, say, some flashlight in the darkness to spot certain elements of biology. So maybe hope that's explain a little bit.
Yeah, it does, of course, especially the comparison with the COVID. It's very helpful. The second question is there any relation between computational biology and artificial intelligence? Is there any influence between those two?
Absolutely. So artificial intelligence, and I prefer to say machine learning, it certainly plays an important role as an important method for computational biology. And recently there was like a really powerful discovery, not powerful method that's been developed that is extremely, that solved a long-lasting open question in computational biology. Maybe solve is too strong, because, but at least provides the best solution relatively to what has been attempted before. And this is a so-called AlphaFold program that's been recently developed by Google, by DeepMind. So what that problem does, and what was the problem, what the program does, and what was the problem. Again, since you mentioned that it's nice to use the analogy with COVID-19, let me again use the analogy with COVID-19. Perhaps, we've been all bombarded with the pictures, and probably we all see that this viral molecule is like kind of round and has this little spokes, around the surface. This is actually a very particular protein, the spoke protein, that is being on the surface of the virus. And you probably also saw that pictures where you show that show that this viral particle is kind of attaching to the human cell. And then to attach to the human cell, they're sticking another kind of, this is actually a receptor, a protein, and they kind of fit very nicely each other. And if they, because this fit, the virus can enter the human cell. So I was talking about sequences, but now I'm talking about fits. This is shape. So the sequences provide a coding of proteins, tells us what are the building blocks, but that's not it. The fact that we read whole human genome, it's not it yet. We don't know how it functions. And part of the question how it functions is to understand what is the relation for this proteins between the sequence that we can read out and the shape. And this is difficult to compute. It's also not so easy to get experimentally. So of course, we would like to do it computation. And that has been a holy grail of computational structural biology, when we are trying to understand, how you can get from this sequence to the structure, which is so important, because if we interrupt the interaction between those two proteins, this is really, the virus will not be able to enter. So, but even if we know the sequence, even if we know the physics, so we can know, this is made of electron atoms. This is so huge that figuring out how to go from the sequence to that structure was not easy. And there have been several approaches to do it computationally. A lot of them, there was in fact a competition where so-called Haskell competition, where computational biologists were trying to predict from the sequence the structure of the protein, and simultaneously there was a test set that been of crystal structure of the structure of this protein that was develop independently, and then we could really, in objective way, to see how much progress we get. And recently, machine learning, deep learning have been used to really to collect all the data we have about proteins and the structures, all the many different, I don't want to go into details, but collect all the data and additional relationship between those proteins, and have been able to make such a leap in computational method to predict those structures that is getting it really close to what you could get it experimentally. So that was amazing, and that's very, very valuable. And having those structures, being able to say, okay, here's sequence, here's structure, is enormously beneficial. So yes, and there are some other fields where deep learning made a really big progress. But I would also like to mention that at least at this now, as the deep learning is applied and understood now, not deep learning, but in general, machine learning, it will not solve all the problems. So one thing is actually quite good that I started with the explaining the construction of an evolutionary tree when we put our knowledge in the model. When models that are obtained by machine learning are different, we don't put so much knowledge, we just put the data. And another thing that we give to this machine learning method, machine learning algorithm, we did pieces of, say, like building block that the algorithm will use to construct the model. That it's going to learn, this is input, this is output, how do I go between them, and using the building blocks that we provide. At the end of the day, it's not easy to open that box and to interpret what that machine actually built. We know it got it. It's figured out somehow the way from input to output. It figured out how, based on all this data that was providing, can go from sequence to structure. But we don't know exactly how that exactly was been done. It's not easy. And in this particular problem, it really doesn't matter so much. Well, maybe it would be interested, but the most important part is was to get the structure. But then imagine different problem. We throw lots of data, patient data, molecular data, etc., drug data, and we ask the question, here is a drug, here's whatever we can, information we have about the patient, will the drug be have side effects when we apply it to the patient? Yes, no. Well, assume yes. That's important information for us because we don't give the drug, or we know if it also can predict how significant are those side effects, that would be also helpful. But then to move the science forward, we have to understand why it will have side effects. What exactly makes it one patient not having side effect, another having side effects? So sometimes the answer yes or no is not enough to propel science forward. We need those models, we need those understanding. And currently, deep machine learning methods are not so interpretable. The models that they built are not so actionable comparing to the models that say we build because we understand the biology, because we understand how evolution progress, because we understand exactly what the function more or less should be. It's just too difficult for a computer, and we throw it at the computer to help us. So this is the difference, and I believe that will be some intersection, that some of this task would be subcontracted to machine learning models, while other will have to be modeled based on the understanding that biologists have.
So machine learning is, as you said, it's not a solution to every possible problem, basically.
It's not a solution to everything, but it's helpful.
I understand. Now I want to ask a bit of a personal question, because I was curious, have you ever always dreamt of becoming a scientist as a little girl, and how did you choose the computational biology, basically?
Actually, I always have been dreaming about becoming a scientist. I don't know how that dream came through. Maybe, maybe reading the book of Eva Curie about Maria Curie was so influential. I know that that book was very important for me. It's hard for me to really put my fingers what make me really wanting to do that. But I really wanted to become a scientist. I really, it was really something that was appealing to me. Now, how did I choose the discipline? I almost feel that I haven't chosen it. It has chosen me. So basically, my when I wanted to be a scientist, I wanted to be a mathematician, and then I modified to be that I wanted to be a computer scientist, and I followed this um, dream of being this mathematician or computer science that is working on the boundary with mathematics. And I did my PhD in computer science. I started my first faculty positions in computer science department. But then I think one of the aspects of life is I was married to mathematicians, and also we had two children, small children that were born when I was a graduate student. And we had a really tough time of finding position in the same place. So we've been patching here, there, moving from place to place, not being for longer than once every 2 years in the same place together. And eventually, I think I decided something has to give. So I said, well, and in meantime, actually, it's also interesting that I was working in graph theory, and graph theory is the theory of networks. Now remember my networks. So this is a mathematical theory that helps to analyze and to prove properties about those networks. And in fact, the evolutionary trees and some sort of networks that do not have any cycle. They are simpler networks, but they are also networks. So that was actually my focus of much of my research in computer science as such. So anyway, back to my life. I decided enough is enough. I will just, I'm just going to even if we don't get a position in one place, if the city is big enough, I will just follow and figure out what to do. And then my husband obtained position at George Washington University. I could not complain that city is not big enough, so I have to be true to my word. So I followed to Washington. And then perhaps just months or so into when we moved to Washington, D.C. area, and there was an announcement in American Mathematical Society that Sloan and Department of Energy is willing to fund a mathematician / computer science / physicist or somebody who is a really strong quantitative field to come to move to the field of computational biology to perform computational biology research. So I didn't have any other idea what I should do next. So I applied, I got this fellowship. And then I became researching computational biology. And I really, I think that was in some way a random move, but in some way I was really, really happy that I get a chance to really do this move. And I'm happy that I'm working on what I'm working on now.
So it was a bit of destiny coming to life.
Yes, and in some way it's a little bit of this optimism. I say, okay, let's just do it, and something will come, something will happen. I mean, this is big enough city. There must be some interesting opportunity. It's a position in there's a couple of universities. Sooner or later, something will pop up. Now, when I look back, it really didn't have to. It really didn't have to. The longer you have the gap, I was fortunate that the opportunity came immediately. The bigger the gap you have, if any, the harder it is to come back to research. So that's one of the challenges actually that women have to face. That often, they have break because there's children, family, and then that's very often they fell from this research path. I was lucky in this case that opportunity emerged very soon after I arrived to US.
So I think is what you just said just directs us to the next question, which is basically, uh, if you could tell me what is the difference in the career path between men and women in the science sphere, in the academic career, basically.
So let me start by saying that I certainly do hope that, and I see it's changing, that the differences are being bridged and are getting smaller. So I may tell you a little bit about the differences I see and how it was for me. Hoping that this kind of challenges will not be also present for the younger generation because they really didn't have to be there. So the thing is that uh, the what I would say that there are some areas, there are some regions of your whatever life when you don't see those differences. You feel this all the same. And there are some pockets when you see, oops, it's actually not. So my career, I was kind of going on this swing. Oh, this is all blissful and wonderful. Everything is fine and good. And they say, oh, perhaps not. And then, oh, maybe good after all. Oops, perhaps not. And this is perhaps not, were very, really superficial. Really not, they didn't have to be. So the first thing is, of course, oh, this is so good. A girl and a good in math. Wow, so nice. So I felt good. But then, oh, a girl wants to study math? No, girls don't do math. So I say, oh, maybe this is a mistake. Maybe I shouldn't be going to I actually studied mathematics in Warsaw University. Perhaps I shouldn't be going there. But then, I was dyslexic. I had problem with, I was doing what they call the grave errors, which is a no for humanities. I couldn't get the names. I didn't really like biology to start with because you have to memorize some. I just didn't see that. What else I could do? So and I was good at math. So I say, okay, I will at least have a good time and study something that I like. So I went to math department and really enjoyed there. I didn't feel that being a woman there was any different, other than perhaps, well, you can see that the proportion is not to women's favor that most in computer science, especially in computer science, most of my colleagues were male. But that's somehow I didn't feel that that would matter, right? So that was good. And then, of course, I decided to, I always dreamed to be a researcher, so now I wanted to do the research in mathematics. And as it comes to, again, the response of more of society, my perhaps closest environment. Say, oh, really? I really want to do that? It's, this doesn't give you money. It's difficult in the family. And, you need to, presumably want to have children, etc., etc. But I applied for a PhD in computer science at UBC. I obtained the fellowship. Say, well, why not? And again, everything was nice. Everything was, blissfully great. There was no difference as I was being a graduate student once I got there. Until I got pregnant. and then again, say, oh, then you certainly are going to stop, right? You need to devote all your time to your children because, of course, this is so important. Of course, you want to be a good mother. And that was tough. That was probably one of the toughest moments when say, really, being a good mother means I have to give it up, all of that. And say, well, how about not? So I haven't, but I had the thought that there is something wrong I'm doing by not giving up when perhaps I should for the goodness of my children. So, but then somehow, I got a lot of support. I got support from my actual PhD advisor who was very supportive. And the swings go back. Again, all of it was peacefully. And you can imagine, I can give you a little bit more difficulty was when getting the job. And there is some subconscious bias that men would be better in computer science. And if it's women, that perhaps is not so good. So there was, again, the swings going back and forth. And as you could see, the swing is mostly, the low point is mostly perception. Is something that we should be able to remove quite easily. And I hope in the last years there have been progress to bridge these gaps, because they don't have to be there. In fact, I thought perhaps that this gap was bridged more than it really was. It is. I've been recently a part of a meeting with a conference that joined women in computational biology on various career stages, and I had this conversation with younger women. They still have this concern about, do I harm my children? Because science is extremely demanding. It comes with you when you go home. You continue to think about these problems. It's hard to leave it like as a job from that ends at 5, because it goes with you everywhere. To which extent that influence the commitment, or say the time that you spend with your children. And actually, it certainly in some ways does both, but it also does in some way positively. Later on, so one of my children is moving into a research career, another decided to become a dancer. So I was kind of, to what extent, I read an interview that he gave, say, was that hard? And say, one thing that I learned from my parents is follow your dream. So this is my dream I'm following. Somehow it turned out okay for him too.
Yeah, that's a very interesting thing. But I think for women it's very difficult sometimes to find this balance between work and family, because if you're not at home, you have this guilty conscience, and then when you're sometimes at home, you feel like you would like to do more. It's definitely a challenge. Yeah.
Absolutely. And as you can notice, that it was me who followed and say enough is enough, and decided to follow my husband, assuming that he will go to big city. so there are some conditions I was putting on I will follow, but let that be a chance there that I will find my calling in this new place. So yeah, actually it is, and I think it's important then to have your hierarchy. Of course, research matters, children matters, but then people put a lot of other things what apparently should matter, but they don't. How, like is it important, say, that your house is super clean, right? Especially if you don't have, as you start, that you don't have money for help. What are things are important? You have to make this hierarchy of the importance, and certainly children are not very top of it. But there are other things that society may suggest that are very important, but they are not.
And yeah, I totally agree with you. Like, clean house is not the priority.
It's not the priority, and it will not be clean unless you get some help, because being a student or graduate, and you don't have the money. Supportive family helps a lot, of course. So if you have support group, that probably is one single thing that is most helpful. Because other things that, for example, happen a lot is that all of a sudden we are in the situation that we both have a conference, we both have something happening, and then, school is out, whatever, snow, school is canceled. So there are many things like that, and I always had a support group in the area. My parents of other kids, my parents of friends of our kids, that were very also supportive. And that's also part that society. If society is supportive, then that's will be done. Of course, I'm a late person. I stay late. So once the children started to go to parties and you drive them around, I would be the one to to bring everybody home because I would be awake at the time when other parents would rather go to sleep. So we share those responsibility. I would be driving kids to school if that was on my way. So we share this responsibility, and that was really really helpful.
My next question is, I think, connected with what you've already told me. How would you encourage young women to basically, take up science and choose science as a career? What advice would you give them?
So as everybody who is taking career as science must be, of course, wanting it. Must be the science and the research must be appealing to as a career path. So we start this as a given somebody emotionally likes to do that. And how? So I rather say how to make it happen. So one of it I think is extremely important to have a support group. It's mostly because at least I kind of hope that is changing, but maybe not till the end. Maybe not in every society. Maybe not in every community. That find a support group, people who will think like you, will support you, who will be there for you. If you need something happens, like. For example, I was working at the fellowship that I got, the Sloan Fellowship, was in Johns Hopkins University, which is Baltimore, and I am living in Bethesda. Kids are going to school in Bethesda, right? And then you get a call, your kid have a fever, go and pick him up. so you have to have a support group that are really ready to help you, and that you have to have also I think that probably is the most important. The support group is probably the most important, because many other things, and also I think know what you want to. Don't be too much influence what other people think what you should do, right? And then again, the support group helps because it will remind you about it, that don't give up too early, because somebody thinks that that's not a good idea for a woman to do that. I hope it's less of it now than it used to be in the years when I was doing my PhD, when I was doing my first step. But I think the single thing that is really important is don't give up too early, because this is the swing that perhaps everybody goes through, and have a support group and talk to your support group and use your support group. So yeah.
So a lot of courage in a support group. And my next question is, do you believe Polish people have any kind of trait that is helpful in the academic research, or you basically don't believe in this kind of notion that certain nations have certain traits and they're helpful or not, maybe?
No, definitely not. There is no trait that will make you a certain nation to be more prone to be a researcher. So, but what is really different, and what can make a difference, is what society thinks about science, how society supports science, how society support education. So those elements that are not really related to talent might influence, perhaps which area of research is, say, more popular in certain countries, whether basic science is valued, or whether really the value is being put to the research that has more immediate application. There's also this element of having certain clusters that are very good at some area of science. That may happen because you have one talented person attracting another person in the same interest and forming a school or a group. So like in past, we've been aware on the famous Warsaw School of Mathematics. There's a very strong group of graph theory in Hungary. So you can see those clusters of that build around some common interest areas that then attract more students, attract attention, and then you may see those differences. But those differences are not because there's some trait. It's just because this random motions of that science has, and also what society thinks, what support, what's being funded, and what's being how strong also say basis young people get in school.
So, because you started this interesting point, I would like to ask you, so what could we do as a society to, encourage science more and to understand science, basically, as a society?
I think as a society, of course, is important to convey that science is important, that research is important. It is through programs. It is through, we have so many ways of now, so many ways we can spread the knowledge and spread the enthusiasm towards science through so many different types of media. So I think this is also perhaps emphasize the scientific successes all around the world. And also what I think was important and is not to lose the fact that science is very broad. It's not only curing the cancer, which we all really dearly, wanted to be done with it. But there is also solving like famous Poincaré contradiction in mathematics that you may not necessarily help you to cure this cancer, but it's also important step that science is part of it is also like art that need to be supported, even if you don't know immediately how Poincaré conjecture solving this will help your life. Science needs to be supported, needs to be appreciated in a society for young people to follow scientific paths. Of course, there's always people who are so hooked on it that they will follow no matter what. But we want it to be accessible to all and independently on the background, independently on where the person was born, independently what's the sex, independently, of anything. So that's really you have to show this to people that this is exciting, this is nice, and this is a way to contribute to society in general, which I think about the kind of dreams to provide, to leave some contribution, something that will be left behind you, when you leave.
I think your last sentence is like a perfect conclusion to our interview. This idea of leaving something behind, the commitment to society and to the world. So thank you very much for that, and thank you very much for the interview. I think it was very interesting. So it was a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure to be here, and it's my pleasure to talk to you as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.